So this arrived today in my mailbox. It is the 5th edition deluxe version of Curse of Strahd. And for those of you who have been gaming with me for any length of time, this should look familiar to you. We're going to take a look at what's in it because I can't see any of you guys in person right now, and I just had to share the new Curse of Strahd revamped coffin set. It's shaped like a coffin. All right. So you guys know that this all started in 1983 with this module here, Ravenloft, written by Tracy and Laura Hickman. The story goes that Tracy Hickman was playing Dungeons and Dragons in an ongoing campaign, and his group of adventurers were going through a dungeon because back then D&D was all about walking through underground caves and complexes and finding monsters and killing them and taking their stuff. That's basically what D&D was in 1983. And so Tracy Hickman was playing in a group, and his group was in a deep level of the dungeon. They kicked down a door, and the monster inside, as he tells the story, was a vampire. And Tracy Hickman looked at that, and he was distracted for the rest of the game. At least this is how I've heard the story. And he said that that was wrong, that vampires should not be random monsters that you encounter in the dungeon, that a vampire is more important than that, and more cunning and more deadly and had more resources. And so he began working on an adventure with Count Strahd von Zarovich, the brooding lord of Castle Ravenloft. And it was a module unlike any other that had come before because it was plot-based, character-based. It had its roots in gothic horror with a vampire count on a castle overlooking a impoverished village. There were curses and hags and zombies that when you cut off their limbs, the limbs kept coming after you. It was really unlike anything that had happened before. I remember being 8 years old, looking at this and telling my dad, I want to get it. And there was something about this that he didn't like. My dad was the guy that introduced me to D&D. But this one, he didn't want to buy. And so at that point in my life, 8 years old, I was getting $2, I think $2 every other week for an allowance. And so I saved up, and these were $7.99. So after an awful lot of weeks of not buying anything else that I wanted, I was able to go into McNeil Hobby, and I was able to buy this module. And ran this module more times than I can count. Literally, I have no idea how many times I've run this adventure. Lots of people have a similar story, which is why years later, this became the only module to have a sequel. And so there's a second, it's called Ravenloft 2, The House on Griffin Hill, The Further Adventures of Count Strahd von Zarovich. And I can proudly say I finally managed to run this module in college, probably 1996-ish. And it was every bit as fun as it looked like it was. But it definitely required long, sustained, character-driven adventuring. This was not a kick in the door, kill the monster and take their stuff adventure. The original Ravenloft had all these gothic tropes, but ultimately what you did in the end was you got to go to the castle on the mountain, kick in every door, kill the vampire, save the village. And he had some stuff to take. This one was much more character-driven, not necessarily about taking the vampire stuff. Every edition of Dungeons & Dragons over the last 40 years has had some version of Ravenloft in it. And not to be any different, 5th edition had Curse of Strahd, which takes this vampire and his story and elaborates on it and creates this really complex storyline. It's a traditional 5th edition hardback adventure. Probably the best version of Ravenloft that's come out since 2nd edition. So that would be 20 years. The 3rd edition Expedition to Castle Ravenloft was okay, but They made Strahd look like an elfin pirate, which was a little weird. 4th edition had not much Ravenloft at all. They didn't really go back to Strahd except to name drop every now and then. 5th edition went back to the roots, did a really nice job. It sold so well, and it's doing so well, that after a year or two, what is this? Curse of Strahd first came out, 2016. So after 4 years, they have decided to celebrate Halloween this year with the deluxe set. Yeah. Now I'm like the neighbor on Home Improvement. So the deluxe coffin set is basically this revised and turned into something else, something more. I don't know how much more because I haven't opened it yet, but I'm going to do that soon. So the big question right now is, how many times can they trick me into buying the exact same adventure? The answer is 3 times, actually, but the really deluxe version doesn't come out till next month. So we'll see how that works out. So I have been waiting all day to open this. I've been waiting all day to show my favorite gaming people what is in this glorious coffin box. First of all, this is a slipcase, which I'm really grateful for, because I think this looks a lot cooler than the original cover art. It's really cool looking coffin. Open it up, and you open the coffin. Buddy is really interested in this. And inside the coffin is Strahd lying in state. So it actually looks like you've opened a coffin and there's a dead vampire in there, which is pretty freaking cool. That just slides right off. And inside are the contents. And they've got these nifty little drawstrings so you can pull things out. Buddy is curious. He's wondering why he's on camera. I'm going to pull the first thing out here. One of the things that I keep hearing about is how they have replaced all the hardback book with multiple paperback books. So I'm curious what this is going to look like. Of course, it's a lot easier to run a game with a hardback book. It's not going to fall apart on you. But having multiple books might help that a little bit. But so here is the Curse of Strahd ReVamped. This looks like the adventure book. It looks a lot like the adventure that I've got. Lots of full color art. There's Strahd on his nightmare. Bucephalus, the Wonder Horse. You can find him in the crypts beneath the castle. Sorry, spoiler alert if you didn't know that. It's 37 years old though, so I think it's beyond the normal limit for spoilers. I don't think I broke any rules there. So yeah, this is the adventure. And this book, it's pretty big. It's a lot like the hardback itself. It's 224 pages long. So that's the main adventure book. Then it comes up with this kind of pamphlet, basically. It's Creatures of Horror. So if you're running this, it's got all of the monsters in it. This is a 20-page appendix that was basically lifted. It was 20 pages that used to be in the back of the hardback book. And now it's its own separate book. So anyone who's run a D&D adventure that has monsters at the back of the book knows the frustration of, I've got the room description here, and then 400 pages later, I've got the monsters that are in that room. So it is really nice to have a separate monster book. Table of contents on the back too. So if I really need to know the stats for a Strahd zombie, it's on page 18. So, you know, actually, it's pretty cool because page 18, these don't seem to be alphabetical. I would have thought zombie, I would have looked for Z. And Madame Ava is alphabetized under M. That's interesting. Izek Strasny, alphabetized under I. We alphabetize by first names in Barovia. That's good to know. There is another book here on the Taraka deck, which is pretty awesome. The Taraka deck is the Gypsy, or Vistani, sorry, the Vistani book, or deck of cards, has magical fortune-telling abilities. Ravenloft in every successful incarnation has used a Taraka deck in order to make the game a little different every time you play it. So you have a fortune telling at the beginning of the game, and that determines where you'll find the bad guy, Strahd von Zarovich, where you'll find the holy symbol that can chase off Strahd von Zarovich. So it's pretty cool that there's a Taraka deck here. And then this looks really neat. There are handouts. Anyone who's played Ravenloft would know the beginning. I am the ancient, I am the land. My beginnings are lost in the darkness of the past. It's the story that Strahd writes about himself, and you find it while you're wandering around in his castle. This is on really nice cardstock paper. It looks, there's some aging going on around it. Not enough to make it in any way difficult to read. But this is a really nice handout that you can give to your players. There's also the Journal of Rudolf von Richten, letters from the Burgomaster, the invitation to dine with the Count, and a couple of other journal entries too. Really, really nice things to be able to hand out to the players. And then there is a glossy, full-color, map of Castle Ravenloft. I wasn't looking at the right side. Also, map of the village of Barovia, which is super cool. Glossy, really nice. And a brand new 5th edition Dungeon Master's screen with some interesting scenes. If you play through Curse of Strahd, you get to go to the windmill. Of course, you get to go to Castle Ravenloft. That drawbridge is pretty infamous with anybody who's actually played the adventure in the past, in any of its incarnations. Another place that you get to go, I believe that's a monastery, and you meet these characters in this house. This is the first level intro adventure to get into the adventure proper. There is, I believe, one other thing here, one other bundle, separately packaged. There is a new Taraka deck that comes with this. Ooh, and the lid comes off. All right. In the past, when Curse of Strahd first came out 4 years ago, they had a new Taraka deck. I think I've gotten 4. This might be the 5th Taraka deck. It's a nice little deck, but it's hard to imagine sitting at a shadowy table with somebody reading your future off of something that's basically like playing cards. The art is gorgeous. There's a description of each card. But one of the things that was appealing when Curse of Strahd ReVamped was announced was it comes with a new Taraka deck. And these cards are much more Taraka sized. So this is the sort of thing that you could easily imagine you're role-playing. You sit down across from Madame Eva, the Vistani seer, the Rani of the Vistani task. These are the types of cards that you could see her laying out. Here's the bishop. Looks like the same artwork, the artifact, the beast, just much larger and much more cool at the table if you're laying these cards out in front of a player and pretending to tell their future. And hey, it's a role-playing game, so if that's what the cards say, that really can be the future. There's one more thing here that I'm trying to open, which was just kind of humorous. If we could still get together and play in person, you can, and I would love doing this. Welcome to Barovia postcards. Old Bone Grinder. Dream pastries made fresh every day for when you get to go to the windmill. The Abbey of St. Markovia. The best care this side of the Ballinox. And finally, spend a night in the Death House. Stay as long as you like. Longer even. So these are things that you can send out to your players to get ready for your first session of Castle Ravenloft. I'm just checking to make sure there's nothing else buried at the bottom of the coffin. It seems unlikely. Hopefully I'm not going to break my coffin trying to find this out. Nope, it'll come apart, and there is nothing, there is no false bottom or anything else hidden away. So, postcards. Taraka deck. Taraka-sized Taraka deck. 5th edition DM screen. Super cool glossy map of important locations in and around Barovia, and also a gigantic glossy full color map of Castle Ravenloft, which I know most of you could probably draw from memory because it's so iconic and it's been around for so long. Really cool handouts. Some of these handouts have been around since 1983, but it's the first time that the game has provided something on good quality paper that you could hand out. A lot of people have made their own versions of this, but this is something that just comes ready to use. Rules on the Taraka deck. Pamphlet of Monsters. And 224-page adventure, which reprints with edits the original hardback. Finally, when you open your coffin, dude's looking at you. The man himself. So there it is. Curse of Strahd ReVamped. Super cool container. Really great adventure. Best they've done since the original version of Ravenloft. All right, I wish I could have shown you guys this in person, but it is what it is, and hopefully someday we'll get to play it. Take care.